to Explained, the show where we answer one crucial question that will determine the outcome of the 2019 polls. I'm Aarti Subramaniam, and helping me answer that question is Mirror Now's consulting editor, Vinay Tiwari.
Thank you, Aarti. Today, a question which looks into the past, which will hopefully answer a likelihood of the future.
Now, in the run-up to these polls, you've seen 21 political parties across the spectrum joining hands on a range of issues, from EVM tampering to the allegation that this Modi government is destroying institutions. They have come together on a range of issues. While some of that is actually translated electorally, where you've seen the BSP and the SP come together in the alliance, others like the Congress have been left out. Now, this entire thing has always given speculation to the possibility of a third front government, or at least a non-BJP government. But how feasible is such a front? And to answer that question, we're going to look, as Vinay was saying, to the past. How successful have non-Congress, non-BJP governments been in the past? That's what we're going to answer on Explained. Now, Vinay, the first such experiment was in 1977. Now, this was just after the emergency. It was politically a very significant time for the history of India itself.
It was, and I think the story of 1977 actually started in 1971. Indira Gandhi had just come back with a landslide verdict on the back of Garibi Hatao slogan. Within 6 months of her coming to power, we had a war with Pakistan, which India won decisively. So she was at her strongest best. But something else happened in 1971, which was an insignificant man, a bandana-wearing, laddu-eating politician called Raj Narayan, who very few people had heard of and most people didn't take seriously. He filed a case in the High Court alleging that Indira Gandhi won the election by conducting electoral fraud. 4 years later, the High Court actually agreed with that and disqualified Indira Gandhi. That triggered a series of events which ultimately led to the emergency being imposed in India in 1975. That period also coincided with the emergence of Jayaprakash Narayan, who was leading an anti-corruption movement. JP movement in many ways became the trigger for the formation of the Janata Party, which came together. And when Indira Gandhi, under pressure, announced the snap poll in 77, that's where the Rainbow Alliance came together, prompted largely by JP.
Right, now 1977, as Vinay was mentioning, was this first rainbow coalition of anti-Indira parties. Essentially, that was the one thing that was binding them together. Now, the parties on your screen, the Swatantra Party, the Socialist Party, the Praja Socialist Party, in fact, even the BJP in its previous avatar, were all part of this rainbow alliance. The 1977 election saw the shock defeat of Indira Gandhi, and the Janata Alliance, the Janata Party, came to power. And that was the first non-Congress government in India.
That's right. And that's where the anti-Congressism movement in India started, because till then Congress was dominating the map. And except for some leaders who were making a noise, JP was one of them in many ways, who was making a noise against Indira Gandhi's policies. There were very few people. She really had no opposition. But for a split that happened in 69 between Congress R and Congress O, Indira Gandhi had a full reign and in many ways was the strong woman in India who nobody could challenge.
Right, so the 1977 election was that one watershed moment in the third front, or the emergence of the third front government. Now, you would have thought that this experiment would be successful, but it didn't last very long. The honeymoon soon ended, and it was an experiment that collapsed within 2 years. This collapse was something that was largely a result of the differences between the constituents itself. I guess if you do have politically divergent, ideologically divergent parties that come together, you can expect some cracks.
Oh, absolutely. So Morarji Bhai was, in that sense, the first Prime Minister of this alliance. And the contradictions started coming out very quickly. Charan Singh was, in those days, Charan Singh was a very tall father of Ajit Singh, who most people know now. Very tall Kisan leader who had his own politics to play. There were other leaders who also had their own politics to play. Raj Narayan, for instance, had his own politics. And remember, Raj Narayan in the 77 election actually defeated Indira Gandhi and won the election. So he became important. He became the health minister of the country. So there were these people who were already tugging at it. And when you have a motley alliance like this, it's almost like an investor in a startup whose idea to invest is not so much to stay but to exit. I mean, they were looking for a chance to exit when you think you can make profits, and that's what happened.
Right, so the collapse happened. Morarji Desai had to step down, and there was a replacement Prime Minister, but that didn't last long either.
Charan Singh was the present Prime Minister, lasted less than 6 months, and that again was largely because Charan Singh was a North Indian politician, not known outside of that. Remember that Rainbow Coalition had parties from all over, but largely Charan Singh was somebody who was known as a politician only in the North, and also little inexperienced in terms of the way the Delhi Darbar functioned. And clearly, most people were plotting his exit even before he actually took shape in terms of a Prime Minister.
Well, that experiment lasted a whole of 2 years, and there were general elections after that where Indira Gandhi came back to power. So a short-lived experiment. Now, a decade later was the second big experiment, the second try at putting together this disparate group of political parties together. And that was led by the man on your screen, VP Singh. He was the challenger to Rajiv Gandhi. Remember, Rajiv Gandhi at that time was battling allegations in the Bofors scandal. And VP Singh really emerged at that time, and he put together a bunch of political parties that include the DMK, the Janata Dal, the TDP, the AJP, and they formed this new front.
Yes, and VP Singh was a very interesting politician. He was drafted in the Rajiv Gandhi cabinet as a finance minister, and ironically, a lot of people may not remember, but he actually raided Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani, the late Dhirubhai Ambani, and Amitabh Bachchan as well. That was the time when the Enforcement Directorate had been given a free run. Bhure Lal at that point of time was leading something called Raid Raj in many ways. A lot of industrialists were raided at that point of time, and that upset Rajiv Gandhi to a large extent. Rajiv Gandhi, to placate the industrialists, moved him to the defense ministry. VP Singh being VP Singh, he started investigating the Bofors deal and found some information there which he thought could be used, and that's how his exit from the Congress and his decision to actually become a challenger to Rajiv Gandhi started taking shape.
Right, well, history repeated itself, unfortunately, for the third front, though, when VP Singh and his government fell after LK Advani's arrest. This is a very interesting twist to the entire tale. Now, remember, the BJP was also part of this alliance, and they were offering outside support as well.
That's right. So, three things happened when VP Singh took over as the Prime Minister. One, he dusted out the Mandal agitation report, and that created a massive unrest in the country. There was a lot of violence, a lot of students died, a lot of them immolated themselves. There were riots in many parts, including Delhi, for instance. And then, because BJP was then giving outside support to the coalition, BJP was playing its own politics. They saw an opportunity. So, the Mandalization of Indian politics was being countered by the saffronization of the politics, where Advani decided to take out a Rath Yatra. Remember, RJD or Lalu at that point of time was part of this group. VP Singh instructed him to arrest him at Samastipur, and that's what led to BJP withdrawing the support and the government falling.
And in his place stepped up Chandrasekhar. Now, that was again, you know, it was a short-lived government. Within 24 weeks, that government fell as well. At this point, the Congress stepped in and offered support to Chandrasekhar and his government, but pulled out as well.
Yes, and that's very typical of third fronts. There are wheels within wheels. Chandrasekhar himself was actually sulking when VP Singh became the Prime Minister, because the deal originally was to have Devi Lal as the Prime Minister and not VP Singh at all. When the nomination was actually being done, VP Singh sprung a surprise by proposing Devi Lal, who in turn proposed VP Singh. So Chandrasekhar was already a little in a sulk mode, and that's where he got this chance when VP Singh resigned as a Prime Minister. He got his chance to make the government. Clearly, Congress played a double game as well, because Congress decided to back Chandrasekhar then, and then ultimately pulled the plug on a very, very flimsy ground, something as flimsy as a spying charge, because 2 Haryana constables were lurking outside the Rajiv Gandhi's house.
Well, the second experiment failed, and history kept repeating itself. If you look at 1996, now that was the election which saw a very fractured mandate. More importantly, the whole period from 96 to 98 saw 3 different prime ministers at the helm because of this fractured mandate in itself. Now, if you look at the screen, the 1996 mandate, the NDA, which was led largely by the BJP, had 187 seats. The UPA with the Congress had 143, and the others were 130. So essentially, there was no clear majority, and that led to a lot of political instability, including the fall of the 13-day Vajpayee government. That's
right. So, in fact, because India was the largest alliance, the president invited the NDA. Vajpayee did take oath, but when the confidence motion was moved 13 days later, the government fell. And at that point of time, because the government fell and no one was in a mood to have another election, this so-called National Front emerged with H.D. Devgowda as the man. He was actually the chief minister at that point of time. He was brought out and then made the prime minister as a consensus by all the constituent partners.
Right. So H.D. Devgowda emerged as the consensus candidate. But again, as you know, history has taught us, that didn't last long, and he had to step aside, and I.K. Gujral comes in, supported by the Congress party again.
So the interesting thing is that Devgowda had to resign because the Congress was upset with him about so-called communication issues, and when he moved away, Mr. I.K. Gujral was actually sitting in Indian National Center in Delhi and having a cup of coffee when he was asked to come and take over as the Prime Minister. I think he must have got a shock of his life to have suddenly become a PM. And again, the Congress decided to support him because the ostensible reason given was that nobody wants another election. And hence, they ended up supporting another man from the same coalition, despite having withdrawn from Devgowda's government as well.
And that government fell soon after there was a conflict between them over the Jain Commission report, which was investigating Rajiv Gandhi's assassination.
That's right, and that report actually had DMK as one of the people whose roles were criticized. The Congress was putting pressure on IQ Gujral to remove DMK as an alliance partner, which Gujral refused. And that's what led to the Congress finally withdrawing support.
Well, so there have been 3 experiments so far with the third front. And then the question really emerges, given their history and given their short shelf life, how feasible has this experiment been and how practical is it in today's times? Well, the past 3 attempts at cobbling together a third front have been rather unsuccessful. Will 2019 tell a different tale? Will there be a third front yet again, and will it last longer than the previous experiments?